Welcome back to Spill the Soup, the podcast that gives you insight into the life of a 2021 teenager. I'm your host, Marley, and even though traveling 4,000 miles away may be the last thing most of us have been thinking about recently, this week we're going to be talking about our personal connections to Israel as Jewish American teens and how we choose to incorporate Jewish values into our daily lives. Today I am joined by two guests, Adin Zweigbaum and Jonah Smith. Welcome both of you to the show, and thank you so much for coming. If you guys want to start out by introducing yourselves, please go ahead.
Jonah, if you want, you can go first.
Okay. I'm Jonah Smith. I'm a senior at St. Louis Park High School, and I'm 18.
I'm Adin Zweigbaum. I'm also a senior at St. Louis Park High School, and I'm also 18.
Great. And for everyone else listening, I just wanted to give my classic little disclaimer before we start that, once again, the podcast's intentions are to keep this conversation as simply as open and honest as possible. What Adin, Jonah, and I will be sharing and talking about today is simply from our personal experiences and opinions, not based on any facts or right versus wrong. So now, let's get into the episode. Okay, both of you are really two of my more religious friends, whether it be that you both keep strictly kosher, went to the Jewish day school, are Shomer Shabbos, and more. So I wanted to kick off our conversation by asking, in both of your opinions, what have truly been the benefits and the drawbacks when it comes to kosher dieting and spending your Saturdays in your homes observing the holidays as teenagers? Who would like to start?
Sure, I can start with that one. So, I actually didn't start keeping strict kosher or Shabbat until this past year or two, and then Shabbat actually started at the beginning of quarantine. So, with kosher, one thing that brings in is the idea that every single meal, every single food you eat, you're actually paying closer attention to what that is, understanding where it comes from, and it's almost respecting your food more, and it just brings a greater experience to eating than just, I'm doing this to get myself on with the day. And then with keeping Shabbat, I realized that it's actually a great way to force myself to stop using technology, right? Like, especially now that we're on technology 24/7 with coronavirus, like we use that to talk to our friends, we use that for school, work, everything. Now that I'm keeping Shabbat, it forces me to have 25 hours where no communication with anyone outside of like my actual one-on-one state.
Totally. And on that note, Aiden, just before you go, Jonah, I wanted to ask what the hardest part of making that transition to like becoming more strict about observing the holiday was for you.
Yeah, the hardest part is you forget that there are things you can do outside of technology. Like I'd find myself just sitting extremely bored and trying to find things to do. And it would be that, or that the rest of my family doesn't keep Shabbat, so they would all be using tech around me, and makes it very distracting.
Yeah. What about you, Jonah?
Well, I want to start by saying I don't consider myself religious. I think it's more of, I consider myself more observant. I feel like observant is more relative, and religious, people can be more religious than me and not be as observant, and vice versa. So I think that there's a chasm between the two. But I think that for me, keeping kosher has always been fairly easy, just because I've been keeping strict kosher since I was in first grade. And so it hasn't really, I don't like get cravings to get like a chicken sandwich at Wendy's. It just doesn't seem appealing to me, if that makes sense. And keeping Shabbat, I've always struggled with it. However, this year I've really understood the benefits, as Adin said, with us being connected 24/6 right now. It's just a lot. So I think that it's a lot. I think it's really nice just being able to unplug. I mean, I feel excited for it towards the end of the week when I've been on Zoom 7 hours a day. So yeah.
So Adin, you mentioned that your family doesn't keep Shabbat along with you. So what is your experience really like trying to observe the holiday while they're all in the same house going about their day like it's just another day of the week?
So one thing I do in particular is I try to read during the longer Shabbats when it's like sun doesn't set until 9 during the summer. I try to read through an entire book during Shabbat, except over the winter when I don't really have time to read a whole book. One thing I do is actually my little brother or him and I will watch TV together, but I just don't turn it on, which isn't maybe entirely in the spirit of Shabbat, but the way I see it is if he's just going to be playing video games by himself and I'm not going to be hanging out with anyone in my family, I'd rather sit with him and watch TV with him while he turns it on than do nothing by myself.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful.
And for both of you, I just was curious, has there ever been a time where you felt embarrassed explaining to someone why you aren't able to eat something or why you can't go to some event if it happens to be on a Saturday or Friday night?
Yeah, not at all, actually. I would say that it's probably the opposite. There's almost a sense of pride in it when you have such a strong reason on why you can't do that.
Interesting.
For me, I think at the beginning of high school for me with football games, for example, I was kind of embarrassed to say like, my family is fairly observant and I can't come on Friday nights because we have Shabbat dinner. But as I've grown older, I kind of feel more pride when I say it, just because it's something I really enjoy doing and it's part of who I am and my identity.
I love it. And because we're all seniors and planning on leaving for college in the next few months, do you guys think that it will be harder to keep kosher and Shabbat from wherever you go to school? And how do you guys really plan to make those changes?
Yeah, with that, I'm not entirely sure. So I think with kosher, not much will change. But when it comes to Shabbat, it's definitely going to be different because maybe I'll be in walking distance to more people, so I'll be able to hang out with more people. But also, I will be either living with myself or with a single roommate or whatnot. So I'm not sure how that dynamic's going to change.
Do you think you'll plan to use like your phone or any technology to communicate with anyone from college or be able to do homework if you had like a paper due that night or something like that?
Yeah, at the moment, I don't think I'm going to do that, but also I can't speak for myself in the future. So for all I know, I could completely change my mind and do a whole 180.
Ooh. What about you, Jonah?
I mean, regarding kashrut, I think it's the same for me. I don't really plan to change my diet in terms of what I eat that's kosher and not kosher. But I think that in terms of Shabbat, I'm not really sure. I mean, I'm definitely gonna observe Shabbat in some way. However, I I don't know if it will be as strict as I am now and to that same degree.
Interesting. And kind of on the note of college, in your whole college application, college search process, when a school has a bigger Hillel or Jewish population, does that make it seem more appealing to where you want to
Yeah, I mean, I think having a Jewish community on campus is something that's really important in making my decision. But I can't speak to Adin, what Adin has to say.
Yeah, with me, it doesn't really change much just because I really only applied to one college. So, but I would say if I was in Jonah's situation and looking at more schools, then that probably would play a factor.
Interesting. Okay, well, outside from observing Jewish values here in America, I know that you both have spent pretty significant amounts of time in Israel, especially you, Jonah. Well, to give some background to that, Jonah and I both went on 2-month study abroad sessions at Alexander Muss High School in Israel. They were at separate times, but I'm pretty sure we had pretty similar experiences. But besides that, I know that you've lived in Israel with your family and were actually at bar mitzvah in the Holy Land. So, Jonah, how do you think all of those connections have helped shape your Jewish identity, and how do you use those experiences to help incorporate Jewish values into your daily life now?
When I lived in Israel, I was in first grade, so I mean, I felt connected, but I didn't really understand the connection I had. And then when I went on my bar mitzvah, I felt a really strong connection. But as high school started, that connection I had with Judaism wasn't as strong really until I went to Alexander Muss and just learned in depth the history of our culture and the history of the Jewish people and that um, the land of Israel. And so I think that has kind of shifted how I see Judaism and how much I appreciate it.
Yeah. And was there ever a significant moment, whether it was on Alexander Muss, your bar mitzvah trip, or even here in America, that really changed your whole perspective and made you realize this was something you wanted to identify yourself with more, even though you struggled earlier on in high school?
I don't think it was any single moment. I think it just happened with time and maturity. I just understood the benefits of Judaism and appreciated a lot more and understood it a lot more. A big piece was I started studying with a rabbi once a week, and I think that really got me to appreciate studying Torah and Talmud a lot more and Judaism itself.
Yeah. And Adin, I'm not sure how much time you've spent in Israel, but I'm totally happy to ask you the same thing if you have anything to add on to that. And I know that you study with the rabbi too. So what has that experience really been like for you guys?
Yeah, so I can touch on the Israel part first because that's a little shorter. But so I went on a BBYO trip, which is a little less observant than the trips that Jonah went on. So it was interesting because I was the most observant person on my trip. And even though I'm by no means Orthodox or that learned of Torah and whatnot, everyone referred to me as like Rabbi Adin on the trip just because I was more observant than them all. So that was definitely a funny experience. And then just being in Israel, I felt a strong connection to the land. Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. I have family that lives there, so staying with them just made me realize that not only is this the place I learned about like in Saturday school and in school growing up, but this is a real place where Jews actually live now, and it's not just the Torah, but it's modern times as well. And then on the note of studying once a week, so Jonah and I actually study with the same rabbi, Rabbi John Germasian, and it's really opened our eyes entirely. Originally, I thought I knew a lot about the Torah until I started learning with him, and then I realized that now I know so much that I don't know, and I know that I don't know so much, right? But it's really been eye-opening in terms of how to look at modern times as well, because you can apply all the different values and ethics that you learn in the Torah to most modern day situations.
That's awesome. It's very inspiring. And kind of on a different note, I know that we've all gone to Herzl camp for a few years. And did both of you go to Ramah or just Jonah? Just Jonah.
Just Jonah.
Okay, well, Jonah went to
Yeah.
Ramah, but you both grew up going to the Minneapolis Jewish Day School. So have there been any other significant Jewish educational or opportunities that have helped either of you grow into the young Jewish adults that you are today?
The Judaic studies at the day school, we had a class where we spent, I don't know, however long the class was, like 45 minutes a day or so, going over just Judaic studies, whether it be why we celebrate a certain holiday, what the passage in the Torah means that week, and stuff like that. And then also during lunch, we'd always have to pray before and afterwards. So it wasn't a super observant school, but there were still practices we took to ensure that there was Judaism in our education. And I would say that that's really put me in a state of mind where I'm always asking questions, and it actually helped me know how to learn.
For me, I think that with the Jewish day school, I mean, I got a lot out of it for my age. However, I didn't. I didn't really realize the extent to which there was to learn. I think one another Jewish experience that had the largest impact in terms of education was definitely Alexander Muss, just because I learned the history of the Jewish people from Abraham all the way to modern times and the establishment of the state of Israel. And I think that learning about that just really made me connect more with Judaism and our people, really.
I totally agree. I also went on Muss, and I've gone to Hebrew school for years. I had a bat mitzvah. Like, I would say that I was very religiously educated, but at Alexander Muss, when you're learning about history, you will go to the historical site and have your lecture about the place that you are standing on. Like, it was insane, and it's such a one-of-a-kind experience. So I really think there's nothing comparable to that. And that was, yeah, an amazing experience. And I tried to document it to the best of my abilities. So if you're ever curious about how Alexander Muss looks, I posted them all on my YouTube channel. Marley Camito, search it up. But yes, I could not agree with you more, Jonah. It's really a one-of-a-kind experience to be standing on the place that you are learning about. So that is a totally different experience than just learning from the books. I just wanted to ask you guys before we wrap up, if you could give one piece of advice to anybody listening who is curious about exploring their religious identity, what would it be and why?
Yeah, I would say just one piece of advice that I would give is to ask questions, especially in Judaism in particular. You're encouraged to ask questions. Everything that's in the Torah is supposed to be questioned because that's how you learn. So in order to learn anything about whatever religion, for me, obviously Judaism, because that's what I know, just ask questions about the things you don't know, the things you find weird, and anything else that itches your mind.
For me, I think that people tend to see being observant as something negative, and they say, how do you just not go on your phone for 25 hours? I mean, it's crazy. And I think it's really important for people just to keep an open mind and not be biased if they don't really understand something. And also, like Adin said, our religion is really about asking questions and feeling comfortable to learn more and keeping an open mind. And there's always more to learn, which is something that I find really cool about our religion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and to add on to that, something I love about religion is that there's no right way to do it, no right or wrong. It's kind of a choose your own adventure type of thing, and no matter how religious or observant you choose to be or how not, you are still a Jewish person or of any other religion that you identify with.
Marley, I'm curious. Is there any place in Israel specifically you went to on Moss that especially was life changing for you?
Yes, and actually we went there on accident. Good question, Jonah. Thank you so much. We went to the Golan Heights and we visited this bird observatory. It really has nothing to do with like Judaism. It was just an eye-opening experience for me. And I've written a lot about this experience just because it really opened my eyes of how beautiful a place Israel is. And I've never felt more peace of mind in that moment. It was just, the weather was kind of messy and I don't know. It was just beautiful. There were mountains and rivers and animals everywhere. And it was that one of those life-changing experiences that you know you're exactly where you're supposed to be. I don't know if either of you have ever had one of those like aha moments, but I just knew like in that moment, I had never felt more proud to be a Jewish person standing in the Holy Land, that I built up the courage to go on Alexander Muss without knowing anybody. Like every life decision I had made had brought me to that point, and I was so grateful to be there. But what about you, Jonah? I know you went on Muss. Did you ever experience a place like that too?
Before I went on Muss, I had gone to Masada many times. But once I went on Muss, we went to Masada, we hiked up, and we spent 4 hours up there, I'd say, where we just relearned the story in depth. And leading up to it, we learned about the different sects of Judaism, and we learned about the Zealots, who were the people on Masada. And I think it was just so interesting I found that I appreciated a lot more coming with that knowledge and understanding the position that they were in. And it was just such an eye-opening experience that they went to Masada and they had a synagogue, and they went to Masada with a plan to live there. And I thought that was really interesting. And it wasn't just an escape, it was more of their safe haven of sorts.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, you guys are the best, and I believe that is all the time we have for today. But Adin and Jonah, thank you both so much again for joining me this week and for sharing your very valuable opinions and traditions with everybody listening. And to the rest of you hearing this, thank you so much once again for listening to this week's episode of Spill the Soup. Before we go, please make sure to show some love for the podcast by subscribing and rating 5 stars to whatever platform you're listening on and wherever else you get your podcasts. We'll see you 2 weeks from now for our next episode. Stay tuned. Spill the Soup is part of the Jew Folk Podcast Network. Please subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. For more information, go to tcjewfolk.com/podcast or email the show at podcast@tcjewfolk.com.